Hey kids, Mr. Fly here, hope you're well. Now for the last couple of weeks I've been lucky enough to be borrowing this, the big old F850 GS Adventure from BMW UK. I've ridden it as much as I possibly can, in all sorts of conditions, on all sorts of roads, and learnt as much as I can. In this video I'm going to tell you all the lessons I've learnt. So if you're interested in the F850 GS Adventure, you're going to want to stick around and stay tuned. So in this video I want to bring you a much more in-depth look at the F850 GS Adventure. I want to bring you all the lessons I've learned from riding this bike over the last couple of weeks. I've ridden it in all sorts of conditions, on all sorts of roads. I've ridden it at night, in the rain, on fast motorways, on B roads, you name it, I've tried to do it. So that I can learn some lessons about this bike, the sorts of things you wouldn't necessarily pick up in a 1-hour test ride. So if you're interested in the GS Adventure, stick around and stay tuned. So what's the F850 GS Adventure like on the motorway then? Well, this sort of bike really comes into its own when you're on these big cruisy bits. So as you'd expect, it's pretty good on the motorway. Massive frontal area, so I've got a nice bit of wind protection here. I'm getting a little bit of buffet off the top of my head there. I've got the windscreen, or the screen in its uppermost setting. And it's just starting to touch the top of my head, as I say. So if you're taller than me, I'm 5'8", then you're going to probably want an aftermarket screen on there. But other than that, you're completely here in my signature bubble of calm. You can literally ride with the visor open, and you're absolutely fine, except the wind buffet is closing my visor. You may have noticed I've got one hand off the handlebars. That's because I've got the cruise control engaged. So if you are going to be doing lots of miles on motorway, then the cruise control is just fantastic. It gives your right hand a little bit of a rest. We all need that from time to time. And in terms of power, I've never ridden this bike and thought that it was lacking in power, so it's absolutely fine. I'm just cruising along here at 72 miles an hour, look, but there's loads more for overtakes. Not a problem at all. So, as you'd expect, faster roads and motorways, the F850 GSA, absolutely superb. Right, so to one of the favourite things I like to do on these in-depth reviews, and that's what I call my lugging about test. So we're popping into Great Bissington Station car park as usual. Very busy. I'm actually recording this little segment on a Thursday, so it's a normal working day for those I'm lucky enough to have to commute into London every day. This is where they park their fancy cars. But what I'll do is the usual thing. I'll stop in one of these parking spaces in the middle of one and see how much effort it takes to turn the thing round. So let's just stick her in here. I've got a bit of an idea how much effort it might take. Right, neutral. Stand nice and easy to find. Leans over quite a long way on the stand, this bike. Right, let's turn her off. Okay, so here she is then. Plenty of stuff to grab hold of, which I like. As I say, it does lean over a fair way. At the moment, I'm parked dead in the middle, pretty much, of that parking space. Let's see if I can get round in one go. Okay, here we go. Full lock. Excuse my crib notes on the fuel tank there. Round we go, and actually that is a pretty decent turning circle. That is less than one hole. If I come to the front, show you what I did. So I was parked in the middle there, and I'm just on the edge there, so that's for a full 180. That's pretty tight. It is a fairly heavy bike, it has to be said. To get off the stand takes a bit of a lug. I was helped there because it's slightly downhill here, but I think if you're a smaller person, or dare I say it, maybe a female or a bit of a wimpy person, any more wimpy than me, then you might have a bit of trouble shifting it around. It is quite a heavy old bike to lug about off the stand. Right, now something that a number of people have asked me for when I've been doing these more in-depth reviews on various bikes, some of the more practical aspects about owning the bike. So first off, how about lubricating the chain? It is a chain-driven bike. It's not a shaft drive bike like its big brothers. The good news is it does come with a centre stand, so you can get it on the centre stand when you're oiling the chain. That's great. What isn't such good news is when you come to pump the tyres up. The valves on this, if you have a look at the one on the front wheel, they're the straight up type valves. They're not the 90-degree ones, so it's a bit of a fiddle to get your pump in there. You might want to get yourself one of those little 90-degree adapters. Small point, but you know, just something to be aware of. Another thing that people ask me quite often is, what is the horn like? Now, it's not always very good trying to pick up the horn on this little lapel mic, but we'll have a go. Let's start her up. Here we go. And the horn. Wow. Trust me, that is a very, very loud horn on here. What else from a practical point of view?
Riding position. Riding position is very comfortable on here, but can you get your feet on the deck? Check out this bit of film I took outside just now, just to see where my feet are on the floor. I find it a bit of a stretch. When it's in normal standard height, which is what it's in now, my feet are sort of on the balls of the feet, as you can see. If I put it into the sort of dynamic height, which is more of the off-road riding position, then I'm right on my tippy toes. But yeah, generally speaking, the bike is on the taller side, but it's not horrendously tall. Okay, that's it for, and I'm 5'8", by the way, with a 32-inch leg. All right, that's it for some of the practical issues.
So how about riding the F850 GS Adventure at night? Well, clearly it's not night at the moment, but let me pull over just up here and I'll show you what the lights are like during the day before we use the magic of movies and transport us to nightfall. Alright, let's take a look at the lights during the day then. So this is the normal daytime running light setup, as you can see, sort of an asymmetric look, looks very nice. If you put them onto dip, which I think you do with that button there, then you get, hopefully you can see this, the lights on the left hand side are lit up. And then if you go for full beam, you pull the trigger here forward, and then you get the whole lot, and it really is really bright. Okie dokie. And then to flash them, you just pull that trigger back in the usual way. Additionally, of course, you've got these spotlights on the GS Adventure as well, which of course helps your BC and throws out more light at night. Alright, so with the magic of movies, let's go to night time then and see how they actually work in the dark. So what's the F850 GS Adventure like for riding at night? Well, in short, pretty lovely. It's got these amazing spotlights on here that throw out so much light. That together with the fancy LED headlight means you've got this amazing view ahead. Now, I'm actually recording this, it's about 9 o'clock and it's a summer's evening, so it doesn't get properly pitch black, but I'll turn down the road down here. It's a slightly darker lane so we can get a better view, but even in this sort of late twilight, I can see that the lights on here are absolutely excellent. The TFT is beautiful at night as well. It doesn't dazzle you. And of course the sat-nav as well goes into night mode, so everything's all nice and muted as far as the displays are concerned. One thing you don't get on the big Beamer though, that you do get on the KTMs and now on the more modern day Triumphs, is backlit switchgear. I don't know why BMW don't do that. It can't be hard to do. And on bikes like this that have quite complicated switchery, that rely on you knowing where the stuff is, it would make an awful lot of sense. Here we are, it's properly pitch black here now. If I go to full beam, there we go, that's full beam. I don't suppose the GoPro brings it up. Let's go back to dip and full beam. Not a huge difference. The full beam just throws it a little bit further out, but because of these spotlights you've got on the Adventure, you've already got a massive wide field of view, so really, really good visibility from the lights. But yeah, no backlit switch gear as I was saying, so you need to learn up where the switches are if you're going to be riding the 850 GSA at night a lot. But a huge road presence with all the lights on this thing. People see you coming and you can see where you're going, which is all pretty important. So big thumbs up for riding the F850 GSA at night.
Okay, well, buying and riding the bike is all very well on one thing, but how much is one of these things going to actually cost you to own? So I've, as usual, done some calculations about the cost of ownership of the bike. And I've made some notes so I don't forget them because they're quite complicated, this. So first off, road tax. It's over 600cc, so that's £91 per year if you pay it in a single payment. I got an insurance quote from my friends at Principal Insurance. This one, the best quote that they could give me was £231.38, fully comprehensive, with a £400 excess, which seems quite good for a premium bike to me. And then servicing, this is where it gets complicated. It actually has 6,000 mile service intervals, which I think are quite low actually, but there we are, that's what they are. And I got this quote from my friends at Barnstormer. So there's a running in check at 600 miles as usual. That's £139.65 plus VAT, or £168. In fact, they gave me everything ex VAT, so I'll give you the numbers with VAT included. The 6,000 mile or 1 year service is oil, filter and brake fluid. That's £220. At 12,000 miles, it needs oil filter, valve clearances, air filter spark plugs. That's £406. And then at 18,000, it needs oil filter, brake fluid and fork oils to be replaced in the front. That's £432. So in order to come up with kind of an annual cost for servicing, what I've done is added those three 6,000 mile services together plus the initial running in check, divided it by 3 to give you an annual cost. Still with me? And I've come up with basically £409 per annum for servicing. So if you add those together, tax 91, insurance 231.38 and the servicing at £409, that comes out £731.38 per annum to keep the bike, or £60.94 per month, which actually is about a middling sort of price. It's not cheap by any means, and it's not the most expensive I've come across, but it is still quite a significant chunk of cash just to keep the bike in the garage ready to run, and that doesn't of course include things like depreciation or consumables, things like tyres and brakes, which of course you're going to have to replace as well. So there we go, that's roughly how much one of these things is going to cost you.
How about touring on the F850 GS Adventure? Well, if ever there was a great bike to go touring on, I think this is probably it. You've got the excellent wind and weather protection at the front end, so if you're doing big miles on motorways you can cover those off absolutely fine. You've got the lovely handling on the bike, so when you get to where you're going you can have a lot of fun. And you've got the option of course for the luggage that you can get fitted to the GS Adventure, so you can carry plenty of stuff as well. It's a really comfortable place to be. Very familiar riding position to me. This feels just like its big brother, the GS 1250. A bike that I have sat on for many hours on end, and you could do exactly the same with this. So yeah, for touring, this absolutely ticks all the boxes. A few bikes better. So the F850 GS Adventure in rain then, what's it like? Well, I'm not a big fan of riding any bike in the rain really, but if you're going to have to do it, and occasionally you do get caught out, don't you? Like today for example, then the GS Adventure is quite a good bike to be caught out on, because it's got everything you need in terms of electronics. So first off, I'm in rain mode at the moment, as you can see. Got rain and road mode as standard on the bike, and so that just softens off the throttle response and turns up the ABS, that sort of thing. Whilst I'm talking of electronics, of course it does have ABS and traction control, so you've got the latest electronics to help you on damp, slippery surfaces. And then I guess the other good thing about it is you've got this massive front area as well, so plenty of protection from rain coming at you as well. And of course, from a conspicuity point of view, you've got the extra spotlights on the front of the bike. So if you do need to get out and ride in the rain, then the F850 GS Adventure is the sort of bike that you're going to want to do it on. So what's the F850 GS Adventure like in town then? Well, good and bad. It's got this massive frontal area, so its road presence is pretty good. I like to think that that plus the additional lights on the front means that you're going to be easily seen in traffic, and you do feel like you're sitting quite high up, so you get a good view over traffic and what's going on. The bike is physically pretty wide though, so not brilliant for filtering, I have to say. I mean, it could be done, but not ideal for that. And also the bike feels pretty heavy when you come to a stop, so if you're in stop-start traffic and you're putting your feet down, then obviously you've got to hold the bike up, which not a big issue. I mean, you just keep it on the balance point, but if you're a smaller, wimpier person, you might struggle a little bit with the weight at slower speeds than when you're stopped. So for in-town riding, it's okay, but definitely not the best option.
So at the start of the video, I promised you a list of the lessons that I've learnt, both the pros and cons of the bike. So what are the things that I've learnt about the bike then? Well, let's start with the negatives and get those out of the way. There are a few things about the bike that I don't like very much, and these are in no particular order. And the first one, in fact, isn't really the bike per se, but it's the nav6 that this bike is fitted with. I love the sat-nav integration on the bike, the fact you've got that whiz wheel and you can control that as well as the TFT. I love all that, and I'm a big fan of the BMW sat-nav, the way it integrates with the bike, gives you lots of information. All that notwithstanding, the nav6 has a very glossy screen on it, and if you've got the sun behind you, it's an absolute killer to see. I've made a little clip here. Hopefully you can see this in this little clip of me riding with the bike with the sun behind me. Now the camera on my helmet isn't quite where my eyes are, so it's actually worse for me looking at the sat-nav, but you get a bit of an idea here of how reflective it is. I've no idea why BMW chose to do that with the nav6. On the old nav5 that I own, it's a matte screen. You don't get that glare. And the funny thing is, on the TFT, they put a matte screen so you get no glare. So it just makes no sense that you've got a glossy and matte. So that's the first thing. I've gone on about it, but the nav6 is actually quite hard to see in the sunshine. Okay, next thing, and this is much more significant significant, and possibly the thing that would put me off buying the bike, is it is very heavy to move around and to get off the stand in particular. Now, I'm not a particularly big, heavy bloke. I'm 5'8" and a bit wimpy. I find this quite hard to get off the centre stand. It's not the centre stand, the side stand, I should say. It sits over at a fair angle, and just hauling it up even on level ground is quite tricky. If I had panniers on it, goodness knows how I get on. Compared to my R1200 GS, I find this much, much heavier. So don't go getting this bike, a smaller bike, because you think there's going to be a weight advantage. It's actually pretty heavy to move around because of the way the weight is carried, I think, in this engine as opposed to the low-down boxer engine. So there's that, and that's a big deal for me. Next thing, it is a bugger to clean. All adventure bikes are a bit like that. So that's not a surprise, but what was a surprise is these rather clever wheels that it has on here. It's got spokes, but it's actually tubeless tyres. I like that idea. It makes it much more practical if you have to plug a puncture when you're on the road. But because of the way the spokes are on the outside of the rims, it makes it really hard to get your hands in to actually clean the rims. So spoked wheels normally are quite difficult to clean, but these ones are but at least normally with spoked wheels you can get your hands around and clean the rims. But these are hard both to clean the spokes and the rims. Again, small point, I'm a bit OCD when it comes to keeping my bikes nice and clean. That would drive me nuts trying to clean those, so that's another small point. The other thing is the overall looks of the bike. Now, again, adventure bikes, you tend to kind of love them or hate them. I personally don't think it looks that great. Again, I wouldn't argue that the big 1250 GSs look great either, but I do prefer the looks of those over this. There's something about this bike that just looks a bit, I don't know, just thrown together, not so designed. So that's something about the bike I don't like. That's a very, subjective thing. That's just something I find. Next thing, the TFT on here, even though I've gone on about the TFT in the past month saying how great the BMW TFT is, and it certainly is, it does show the marks. But again, it's got that matte finish on it, which means if it gets wet, if it rains on the bike, if you haven't got a good microfiber cloth with you handy, you're going to end up with water spats on it. If ever a bike needed a protective screen on it, this is the one. I'll come back to that in a second. And then, last but not least, in fact, that was last, so I'll go about it now. So let me just show you, I'll move the camera and I'll show you the TFT screen, and I'll show you what we can do about that on all BMWs with the TFT screens. Right, so this fab TFT screen then, it looks absolutely brilliant, doesn't it? But and it's nice and clean at the moment because I've cleaned it with a microfiber cloth. But if you get any rain on this, it gets all water spattered and it very quickly becomes marked when you're out in the field. The answer to that is to get yourself a screen protector. Now, I very rarely mention these people, even though they are sponsors of my videos, the nice people at Speedo Angels. Now, if ever any bike needed one of these protective screens, it's the GS in all its flavours. So this here is their premium tempered glass screen. It costs about 22 quid, and unlike the sorts of screens that you put on your phone that are made of plastic, this is actually made of glass. Let me just get it out of the box here. So you can guess what it's like. It comes here, it's just a screen like this, made of glass, which you literally attach on there. It's perfectly laser cut to go on there. As you can see, it goes around, that way. And sits on the screen like so. And once it's on there, you can't tell it's on there. At the moment, it's got protective coverings on it, but once you pull them off, it's completely clear. Now, I have these screens on all my bikes. In fact, I have one on my GS as well. And in fact, on my GS, I've got the glossy screen that the old GSs used to have, and I put a matte screen on it, so it's matte to match my matte sat-nav. So everything's matte on my bike. I like that. But on these newer bikes with this fancy TFT, get yourself, as soon as you get the bike, if you spent, a lot of money on the bike, it's well worth spending another 20 odd quid on one of these. If you want the links to these, check the description below, and there's some links there as to where you can get them from Speedo Angels. Okay, so that's the advert done then. Now, I joke, it was sort of an advert, I guess, but I am a fan of those screen protectors, and this bike, they're a lot of money, and I dread to think how much those TFTs are to replace. They are beautiful bits of kit, definitely worth getting those protected anyway. All right, so I've been through some of the negative points. Let me tell you about some of the positive points I found on the bike. Again, there's a number of these, and these aren't in any particular order. First thing is, the handling and the ride on the bike is absolutely beautiful, really, really comfortable. It's just as comfortable and exactly the same riding position as its big GS 1250 big brothers. So if you want to do long miles, long touring on this, this is the bike for you. Weather protection is absolutely amazing off of this. This big front area keeps all the rain and the wind off you, and this screen works pretty well as standard, which you don't often get. Normally you end up having to replace screens. So the weather protection on it is great, the handling is great. The next thing that really stood out for me is the great electronics package on this. BMW really have got to grips with electronics now, and this bike has got all the same things that its big brother has got. So, you know, things from riding modes pro, if you want that. It's got the LED lights, the amazing TFT we've talked about, the ESA electronic suspension, which works really, really well, particularly good if you're going to ride with pillion and luggage. You can up the preload and so on. Works really nicely and feels beautiful. So the electronics package is brilliant. Next thing I've noted on here, amazing TFT. We've talked about that quite a lot. The TFT is great on BMWs, goes without saying. It's the best on the market as far as I'm concerned. Another small thing I like is the windscreen adjustment mechanism. Actually, it's just got this lever here. Although I'll probably make it look hard here, oh, actually it went quite easy that time. You literally just tilt this up and down on the fly to move the windscreen. I find that is just super practical. On the bigger GSs, you have a windy button handle thing, which works okay, but can be a bit of a faff when you're riding. I actually find that easier, even though I made that look difficult. I like that setup. And then the other thing, and this is the big plus for me, is the cost of this bike when compared again against its bigger brothers. When you consider that this has got all the same features and functions as the bigger bikes, this costs way less, about £7 less, in fact, if you spec them up to the hilt. So absolutely excellent value for money bike as well. Okay, so there we have it. That's my in-depth review of the BMW F850 GS Adventure. I hope you found that of interest. Must just say a massive thank you to BMW UK for lending me the bike. What are my closing thoughts then? What is my kind of summary on the bike, having ridden it for a couple of weeks? Well, a couple of things I'm left with. Number one, it's a great value for money bike. £7 less than its big brothers, and it's got all the same features and functions. Feels pretty much the same as you're riding it. Downside, it feels pretty heavy when you're riding. It actually feels a little bit heavier than its bigger brothers as well. So for me, that's a big downer. But yeah, a really nice bike. And you know, if you're on a budget and you want to still go the big adventure bike route, then this is definitely one worth checking out. Okay, I hope you found that of some interest. I don't just do bike reviews here on the Missenden Flyer, but also do how-tos, things in the garage here about how to look after your bike, maintenance, that sort of thing. I do trips and tours, I do monthly live streams, I do bike news, basically anything and everything to do with motorcycles. I'll try and cover it here on the channel. If you haven't done so already, it'd be fantastic if you would hit the subscribe button, and then you won't miss any of my future videos. All right, that's it for now. Look forward to speaking to you again soon. Until then, this has been the Missenden Flyer. Cheerio.